talking about empathy, oftentimes it's put in this lens of compassion. But when you really start to dig into the research and understanding empathy for what it is, it's much more than compassion. Compassion is a piece of it. Shame and empathy cannot coexist. If I'm in conflict with you or we're in a conversation and I'm flooded with shame, I'm going to be more interested or more fixated on reducing my shame than being able to show up for you.
Don't fall into the trap of believing I don't have empathy. As far as what the data shows, it's just patently false. There are just barriers in the way, and we just got to figure out what those are. Hey everybody, Hunter Otis here. Welcome to the Porn-Free Revolution. We help men quit porn. We help them rebuild trust, reclaim their lives, and honestly become irresistible. Maybe for the first time ever in their lives, right? Claim the life that you truly want. Today, before introducing our guest, just want to say we're talking about empathy. I know many of our clients just struggle with this. Maybe betrayal or discovery has just recently happened, and you just have no idea how to show up and what to do. And so stick through us with us here till the end. We're going to be really diving in deep and sharing actionable things that you can do to help you with this empathy piece. But Stevie Hall is here with us. Welcome, Stevie. Thanks for jumping on today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to chat with you and excited to dig in. Just to give you guys all an intro on Stevie. So she's based in Texas, but she's also licensed in Colorado and Florida, if I got that right.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. She's a PhD or has a PhD in cognitive psychology. She's a sex therapist. She's also a sex addiction therapist, certified sex addiction therapist, I should say. She's trained in EMDR, which is a form of acute trauma therapy. And there's several other credentials. She's been busy.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah. She does a lot
passionate of is what it feels like.
There you go. She's very passionate about this work. No, I love it. So she just has a broad scope of expertise, and she's been working with sexual addiction and compulsivity and betrayal trauma and empathy for almost a decade. So I'm really excited to dig in today and see where this goes. One final note that I'll just plug in there. She's a co-author of a book. It's around therapeutic separation. So this is when, you know what, things are just not going well. Maybe the situation is just too heightened between you and your partner and it's not going well. We need to figure out a way to break that cycle. Therapeutic separation is such a powerful way of doing that. And they are coming out with a workbook on how to successfully navigate through therapeutic separation. So that's coming out on April 1st. So we'll be sharing more about that. But, and of course there will be links to her website below this video, etc., where you can keep an eye out for that. But very, very exciting time. Appreciate you guys' work on that.
Thank you. We're really excited to share. April 1st it comes out, and really looking forward to sharing that resource with everyone.
Yeah. Thanks again for being here, and let's jump in.
Yeah, let's do it.
So again, empathy. I know this is something that I massively struggled with. Mm-hmm. When my wife and I were going through our stuff, it's like I was just so entrenched in toxic shame, mm-hmm. and that I just had no idea how to really show up for her. I mean, the situation was just so intense. She was so hurt, and I just didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So can you just, I guess, first, why do people first off struggle with empathy? Maybe let's put ourselves in the shoes of someone who struggles with sexual addiction or compulsivity or pornography addiction. Why do they struggle so much with it to begin with? What would you say?
Well, that's a great question. That's actually what a lot of my work is focused on, is the barriers to empathy. And, I do want to differentiate here. When we're talking about empathy, oftentimes it's put in this lens of compassion. Empathy is compassion. But when you really start to dig into the research and understanding empathy for what it is, it's much more than compassion. Compassion is a piece of it. Compassion, I would say, is the outcome of being empathetic. And so, to do the process of empathy, one of the reasons why people really struggle with it is exactly what you said, shame. Shame and empathy cannot coexist. And part of that is, if I'm in conflict with you or we're in a conversation and I'm flooded with shame, I'm going to be more interested or more fixated on reducing my shame than being able to show up for you, right? Mm-hmm. And so then what happens is, because I'm flooded with shame, I'm actually trying to diffuse that and I become defensive. So I'm going to say, that's not true. That's not right. You can't say that about me. And really, what I'm trying to say is, hey, I'm not a bad person. Can we both agree I'm not bad? But we get so tied up in that that we're totally missing this opportunity to be empathetic.
No, I really love that distinction because that described what I experienced to a T, right? It's like I want to be there for
Mm-hmm.
her and I feel terrible that I've hurt you so bad, but it's like I'm so sensitive. My defenses are going up so easily because I'm trying to like grab a hold of myself. The shame is just has me slipping through my own fingers, so to speak, right? I don't even know how to hold myself in warm regard, and
Yes.
I feel so broken that I just don't even know how to then show up for you, and it comes out in this terrible defensiveness, right? Or even blame shifting and turning it back on your partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The other part of that is not just being flooded with shame, that's a common one, but really being flooded with any emotion. And sometimes that's you're flooded with the other person's distress because you've absorbed it too much. You
Mm,
might also just be flooded with fear, anxiety, anger. And so if you cannot emotionally regulate, again, you're going to be preoccupied with trying to regulate yourself and feel better. And it's going to be hard to show up in that moment.
yeah, so that's huge. So already a huge tip number one is if you want to be able to get to a place where you can have empathy for your partner is learning to manage and regulate your own emotions.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. It's a big part of it, actually, is emotional regulation.
Yeah, so maybe we go there. It's like, can empathy be taught? Like if somebody really is void of it or feels void of it, or maybe their partner is telling them that they're void of it,
Hmm.
right? Which happens a lot when we're struggling to express empathy.
Hmm.
Um, is there hope? Is there hope for them? Like, can they learn it? Can they obtain that? Is it a skill that they can learn?
Hmm. That's a great question. And I say yes. I mean, that's a lot of what my work is focused around is that empathy can be taught. Empathy is a skill. There is research that your development and how you grow up that impacts your empathy, your ability to feel, to resonate, to have perspective taking, all of these different pieces of empathy that are intertwined. And so I can't say that everyone can learn empathy and have the capacity for that. There are very special cases. I'm not talking about those special cases. I'm talking about your average person that may have a background of trauma. They may not have had an empathetic parent. In my experience of working with clients, what I've read in research is that yes, it can be taught. Sometimes, so it may not always mean that the partner is going to feel the empathy, right? And that is, I think, another important distinction is when I'm working with couples, sometimes, and I'll say my male client here, might be doing a great job of expressing empathy. They're going by the rules, they have the right formula, but the other person isn't feeling it. And I just think that's important to note that it doesn't mean they're not being empathetic. Sometimes they can go through all the motions to do it and they mean it, but the other person won't feel it. Right. And
Mm.
so that can be a struggle sometimes in couples. A person also can get to a point of feeling it as well. Right. So it might, I'm sorry to get into the weeds here in
No, no,
research, but
go into the weeds. It's
it's,
good.
it's, uh, it, just to kind of break it down so you know what I'm talking about here, there's three different components of empathy. We have cognitive empathy, that's perspective taking and projection, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Then we go into affective empathy. That's emotion contagion. That's being able to mirror the actions of someone else. Proximal responsivity and peripheral responsivity. The easy way to say that is that my mood is shifted or affected by being close to others or by interacting with distant people or characters, people in the news and movies, that type of thing. The third, which is I think a lot of times how we define empathy, is an empathetic action or empathic action, and that is motivation and action, right? And so a lot of the times my clients come in and they can actually do cognitive empathy. And when I assess them, they have cognitive empathy. They can do perspective taking. They can put themselves in someone else's shoes for the most part. Usually that's a place to work. It's the resonating that's a little bit harder because when we resonate, when I'm trying to experience your pain, now I'm flooded with pain. Now I'm
Mm.
flooded with discomfort. Now I'm feeling shame or guilt. And that's so big. It's really hard to show up in the moment.
So, really, a way you could describe it is they're actually maybe very empathic, meaning in the sense of they're able to take on the other person's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result of that, because of maybe a lack of resilience or even emotional regulation on their part, then all of a sudden they're feeling a bunch of someone else's emotions, and it's just overloading the system
Yeah,
and they're
that
shutting down.
happens. It definitely happens. And I've had assessments where when I went through it, that's exactly what it was, is it was their defensiveness that was coming out because they were being flooded, and it was just totally breaking down any sort of empathy work they could do. So when we talk about empathy being taught, it's not just, hey, you need to care more. Actually, a lot of the guys I work with, they care a lot. That's why they're sitting in front of me. They really care. And they just feel so lost and overwhelmed. So when you start to say, hey, it's not about you caring more, it's let's work on emotional tolerance. Let's work on perspective taking. Let's work on ways that you can express empathy. Let's talk about resonating with emotions. And, someone can have a completely different experience than you. You can still resonate with it. We've all experienced loss, rejection, fear. You can touch on those emotions. So that's really how it's taught, is in these like more specific domains.
Yeah, it's interesting because, a lot of times it comes out in a form of like defensiveness, yes, but also, anger. And I think that's tough because, the anger oftentimes, here's a side story, maybe a little side quest here, is, I struggled with anger in my parenting for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
right? But, and this will make sense, I promise, in a second. But I learned, like my wife and I did a parenting course, like a 3-day intensive, and learned a bunch of skills. And I learned that the reason why I was turning to anger so much was because I just had no idea what to do. And when you don't know what to do, you feel totally powerless.
Mm-hmm.
And anger is a very powerful emotion, right? It helps you feel like you're getting back in the driver's seat, even if it's not effective with the situation at all. Even though it's maybe causing more damage or harm, we go towards anger because we're trying to grab hold of it when we feel so powerless. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that it's interesting. So for guys that are listening to this, like this could be why you're reacting so poorly, is you just don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great way to put it, actually. And thank you so much for sharing a story like that. Um, that's what I often see. It sounds like you've experienced it and seen it too, is when you don't know what to do, you're overwhelmed, you're trying your hardest, and you just kind of burst, right? It's really hard, especially when you're wanting a change. And anger is liberating, like you said. It feels like something's being done.
Yeah, right. But usually the thing that's being done is more damage, right?
Hmm.
And that's so hard. It's hard to face that. It's hard to reconcile with that, especially when maybe we've already caused a lot of damage to begin with.
Yes.
So it's the
Hmm.
opposite of what we're wanting to do, but it's
It's
what
the
we
opposite.
resort to in the moment because you're feeling
Hmm.
overwhelmed and powerless. Okay. So then what would you say, like if someone's wanting to move from that state of just feeling completely overwhelmed, like how can they start, just at least start the process of being able to regulate, like you're saying, being able to fully be present with their partner, even though maybe they're very upset?
Hmm. So, one of the things that I like to start with is emotion mapping. And what that looks like is essentially starting with like writing down an emotion, anger. Okay. What are my kind of external or physical cues that tell me I'm angry? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I furrow my brows. Maybe I clench my fist. I, bite my teeth, those types of things. And then moving into what are my internal cues? What are the narratives happening in my mind? What am I feeling inside of my body? What does my heart rate feel like? Am I starting to sweat? I like to map that with all of the emotions, because what happens is we're often feeling an emotion and having an experience, but if we can only name it anger or happiness, we're not really doing ourselves justice, right? And
Mm.
if I want to communicate with others, I need to be able to communicate with myself. I need to know what's happening inside of me. Otherwise, what you're getting is my reactivity. All right, you're getting that rawness right there in the moment. But if I can map my emotions and I can map my narratives, and I kind of have this system of, okay, my chest is tight, I'm getting a headache, I must be feeling flooded right now. I need to step back from this conversation, right? And then you can come back and go, you know what? I was triggered. What you said really reminded me of this experience with my dad. And I don't have to react to that. I can show up and be here in the moment, right? So part of that emotion mapping is really starting to understand what are my triggers, right? excuse me, going along with that, Daniel Siegel has some work on the window of tolerance.
Hmm.
And I
Oh,
love
yep.
using that work. When am I outside of my window of tolerance? Do I notice I'm outside of my window of tolerance? And I tell my clients, if you are constantly outside of your window of tolerance and then you're in a conflict, you're starting at like a 7 or 8 on a distress scale of, 0 to 10. You're starting at an 8 in a conflict with your partner. You're only going to go
Not gonna go
up.
well.
Yes, so
Yeah.
you've got to be in a place where you're inside of your window of tolerance. And so, in my experience, mapping out those emotions and really understanding what's happening is helpful. Emotional intelligence research also tells us that the more defined or the more definition you can put around your emotions, like really being precise about what you're feeling, like, I'm not just feeling angry, I'm feeling disappointed, I'm feeling let down, that will actually help you cope better. There's a correlation that, you'll use less, you'll act out less, you'll cope in different ways when you're able to be a little more precise about what you're feeling.
Yeah. So like that anger can really be like a secondary emotion. It's like a
Hmm.
reactionary emotion. It's almost like the anger is trying to rescue you from what you were feeling first.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I like to, yeah, bringing up that window of tolerance just to kind of, for those of you listening, basically like really just look at where you're at, like on a scale of 0 or 1 to 10, like 10 being I'm absolutely, losing my cool here, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
To put it
absolutely. It's
nicely.
a way to, yeah.
Um, and 1 being I'm completely calm, centered, fully present. Anyone could say anything and I'm going to handle it well, right? Like, where are you on that scale? And so, like what Stevie is saying, if you're going into a conversation with your partner who's very hurt, maybe also very angry, and understandably so, etc. If you're going in and you're already emotionally overloaded, um, you need to take some time to get grounded.
Hmm.
And or in the middle of the conversation, if you're about to flip your lid, you need to take a time out, take a step back, and
Yes.
get centered so that you can have this conversation in a way that you actually would like to, right?
Hmm.
Afterwards, looking back in retrospect, you'd want to handle it better. And so pay attention to that. I think that's really great. And actually what I'll do too is I have a tool. It's called well, like it's a feelings wheel, but then it's got
Mm.
like the sensations list. It
Oh,
also
yeah,
has
that's
like
great.
negative and positive cognition. So you mentioned like the narrative in your head. So being aware of your emotions, the sensations, the narrative, the thoughts going through your mind. I'll put a link for that below. So anyone listening, like feel free to grab that and start using that thing because that can be really, really helpful.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And then how does somebody like how, if you're familiar with Terry Real, like he talks about holding yourself in warm regard, like in high esteem.
Yeah.
And how, so we're talking about emotional regulation. Do you have any other, I guess, tips for how somebody can hold space for themselves when
Hmm.
their partner is maybe very upset and maybe on the attack a bit, right?
Hmm.
Pointing the finger, maybe throwing some daggers. And again, understandably so, they're really, really hurt. How can they hold themselves in that place of warm regard in the middle of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's hard for any of us to do,
Yeah.
right? It's not impossible, but I don't want to pretend like even as a trained person, that's really hard to do in the moment because we still feel it, right? So I don't want this idea that you shouldn't feel it. It's that when you feel it, you should know what to do with it, right? And noticing, oh, there's that story coming back. There's that trigger. There's that thought. Otherwise, if you're not noticing that, that's where you're responding in a reaction, right, with that narrative or story. So I think that's really important to notice. But what I like to use here that I find helpful is um, Pia Melody, if you're familiar with her work.
Oh yeah.
She talks about internal boundaries, and I really love internal boundaries. And one of the things she talks about is when you're in conversation and someone says something to you, when you get that information, you should say, is this true? Is it untrue? Do I need more information? Is it criticism or abuse? Right?
Hmm.
If you know it's untrue, you push it back out. If you know it's criticism or abuse, you push it back out. It doesn't come into my internal place, right? If I need more information, if it's true, then it's true and it's there. That one's a bit tricky because if you're dealing with shame, you might go, yeah, that's true. I'm terrible. So keep that in mind, right? We need healthy differentiation here, but um, it's important to go, okay, I know they're really mad and they're saying mean things right now. Now is not the time to address that, right? Uh, I can come back later and say, did you really mean that when you said it? Or in what ways am I showing up that way that you would have name called me or used those words? Can we talk about it? But you have to be able to have your own sense of self. And I think this is where a lot of us fail, is we need everyone to have the same thoughts about us that we do. And that can be a little bit tricky. Right?
Yeah, that's huge, right? It's we're
Mm-hmm.
getting a validated sense of self from the people that are around us rather than
Mm-hmm.
validating ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
holding space for ourselves. And that's, I see that a ton with my men, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
even not just from their spouse, but from in their career, from their
Yes.
coworkers, from the people that they serve professionally,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's kids or teenagers or adults or whatever it is that they do, they're looking for their self-worth in how other people react and respond to them. And
Yes.
so if that's how you're getting your self-worth and your partner is reacting and responding very intensely because of, betrayal, intimate betrayal, by your hands, so to speak, that can be really, really hard to hold to any kind of self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's really hard to hold those two together, right? They feel like they conflict. And then we begin to get overwhelmed and angry and, hey, that's not true. And, escalating.
Maybe we could lean more into kind of what you were just talking about boundaries. And um, you talked about how, if our partner's saying something that's hurtful to us, being able to kind of like not internalize that, not absorb it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's maybe lean into this a bit more for a few minutes because this is
Sure.
really important. So if I can get my thoughts straight, a lot of times when we're really upset on either side, we'll go into like
Mm-hmm.
absolutes, right? You always do
Yeah.
this, you never do that. Or in this
Yes.
situation, you're never gonna tell the truth. You're never gonna stop your behavior. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there can be a lot of those absolutes. And this goes right into kind of what we were just talking about. But what do you do, maybe on either side? Maybe we can start with the maybe the betraying partner. How do they, where's that line between I need to really be present and listen, and but I need to also protect myself in this situation too. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I don't have any right to because
Mm-hmm.
of the damage I've caused. What do they do in that situation?
No, that's a great question. Because sometimes what happens is when you're flooded and frustrated, you just abandon the situation.
Yeah. Yes.
The abort light goes off, and before you know it, you're, throwing your hands up and saying, I can't talk about it anymore. I'm done. That's not the way to go.
Right.
There's two pieces here. One is I do think it's important when you're hearing feedback from your partner. Again, to be careful, but not to take it as the truth, especially when you're hearing extremes. There is some truth and reality to it. But I think what I want to encourage you to hear is not, you always lie, you're never going to get better. But to actually hear the context of what they're saying, which is, I'm really afraid, I'm feeling stuck, like I have hope in you, but I'm feeling like that's dwindling. And that will be much more productive. So if you can try to translate what's being said, that's probably, a helpful step. Um, but the other part of that is just to use I language and to say, I really want to be here in this moment, but I feel like I'm flooded. I just don't think I can show up the way I want. Can we please take a 5 minute break, 15-minute break? Can we come back to this after dinner? Right? But anytime you request a break, you have to be the one to come back and reconnect. You have to reinitiate the conversation. But also, you cannot abuse that. You need to come back in a certain amount of time. You can't just say, oh, I want to take a break, and then never bring it up again.
Yes.
Um, this one's hard for couples to do because we feel like, no, we've got to resolve it right now, but you cannot really resolve it if you're both flooded.
Yeah. Because like this whole thing called the prefrontal cortex completely turns off.
It
Yeah.
does. It
That's
totally
where you think,
does.
that's where you make decisions. I mean, Yeah. So expecting yourself to be able to resolve it when this is offline, guys and gals, is just, it's not realistic. It's not fair to you because you're just not there. But you can get there. So like you just said a few really, really, really important things I hope people are keying in on. First, it's kind of um, listening for the truth in what they're sharing. And that truth might not be their exact words.
Mm-hmm.
So saying you never show up on time,
Mm-hmm.
like, well, no, what they're sharing is that I'm really hurt that you weren't here on time for dinner tonight and we felt alone as a family.
Yeah,
Right. So being able to, which is hard, but being
it's
able to
hard.
sidestep the
Mm-hmm.
accusation and get your heart in there and say, what is he or she really feeling about this right now? And can I validate and mirror back that truth and let them feel heard and seen? So really kind of what I tell guys too is like your partner really needs to feel heard and seen. Like you can't fix this. The damage has been done and healing is their responsibility. Unfortunately, it's not fair, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
But you can help,
Yes.
right, in how you react and respond. So if you can show up undefended and really let them know that and help them to feel seen and heard by how you react and respond, it's huge. So like
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that I heard you say there. And then man, the I language.
Yeah.
Keeping it in I instead of you
Mm-hmm.
and fix it mode. Like stay out of fix it mode in those moments. Get back to I and own yourself. I mean, that's going to help you hold space for this right here. And if you're flooded, if you're out of that window of tolerance, saying this is what I need. I want to hear you, but I need to go and get grounded. And if you call a timeout and call a break, you're the one that then initiates coming back. Or you
Mm-hmm.
communicate, hey, I need 15 minutes. I'll be back very, very soon. They might not like that very much in the moment, but then you go and then you come back and you send a message of I'm not running away. I'm not abandoning you. I went, I got calm, I got centered. Now I'm back and I want to hear you, see you,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's about you regulating yourself. So you might come back and your partner isn't regulated. Keep that in mind,
Yeah.
right? It's for you to be able to show up and to be able to hear it. And I really appreciate what you said about this urge to fix things because I see it so much in couples where one partner is like, "Hey, I have the solution. I fixed it. You should feel better." And that's great. You're
When
not
you're going to get
necessarily
over it.
doing Yes, yes, exactly. You're not necessarily doing anything wrong by finding a solution, but fixing it isn't the solution. It's
Yeah.
holding space,
Yeah.
right? It's actually going into the yuck of the emotion that helps make it better. And a lot of times, what I see is that my clients, and we can talk about the betrayer here, they're just not comfortable with their partner feeling disappointment, feeling anger, feeling let down. And you've got to be able to tolerate that sometimes we disappoint people. Sometimes they aren't happy with us. Sometimes we upset them. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, that I'm not good enough, even that I did something wrong. Sometimes, yes, but sometimes no. We just disappoint people. And if you can't tolerate that, then again, you're getting into that flooded place.
Right. What about on the other side? So if someone's
Mm-hmm.
experienced betrayal, well, yeah, how do they handle this when they're sharing what they're feeling and their partner is the one that's getting defensive and reactionary,
Mm-hmm.
etc.? I mean, I suppose very similar things as to what we were just saying, but from a different perspective, what kind of counsel or
Sure.
guidance can you give?
Yeah, well, you're right. A lot of it is similar, but something that I often encourage my partners to do is you don't need to fight for your reality. You just need to stay there. You don't need to convince this person that you're hurt and upset. You can just say, that really disappointed me and I'm hurt. I'm not going to argue about it. That's the way that it is. And a lot of times and I know that's easier said than done, but a lot of times I'm trying to encourage my partners to respond versus react. Because when you can come from that more grounded place, it's a different reaction, right? It's also the I language. So it's not you did this, you're wrong, you're bad. It's I'm disappointed, I'm hurt, right? I'm unsure, I'm fearful, I'm afraid, and I don't want to argue about it. This is what I think would make it better. Unfortunately, what happens is the other partner, let's say the betrayer in this instance, they might minimize or dismiss, and that's going to create escalation. I think we can all think of a situation we've been in where we felt like the other person wasn't hearing us, and we just got more and more escalated. And at one point, we're just,
We're done.
we're done.
Yeah,
And
we're
maybe
done.
we're even something that felt like this was so small. How did I get to this point of yelling and screaming? And it's because when that person is not emotionally accessible, when we realize I'm not understood, I'm alone in this, we're just going to continue to lose tolerance and to escalate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, what if there's nothing wrong with one person or the other person being upset, or both, right?
Hmm.
I think we look at it a lot of times, I think as men, or as the betraying partner, the one that caused the harm. It's like it's all bad unless things are good and happy again. And but what if there's nothing wrong with it being where it is right now? And this is the process that we're going through so that we can learn and grow.
Hmm.
And I think, empathy, to me, it's like, it's easy to show up calm and all of this when your partner's calm and accepting of you and whatever. The real test is having empathy when things are tough.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to grab hold of my point again. I'm trying to make with that, but there's like a grief that happens. Like, if you can grieve the fact that you caused this damage
Hmm.
and let it flow, let it move, and just accept the present moment where it is, instead of constantly trying to like wipe away the damage, clear the damage, fix the damage. If you can accept it where it is, then you can show up where it is. At least that's what I tell my guys. It's like, own it all and focus on how you actually want this conversation to end. Like, what's the desired result? And it might not go that way right now,
Um,
but can you show up in integrity with how you would like to behave, how you would like to treat your partner, even though they're maybe very upset and sometimes, have very, very strong reactions, right? How would you
hmm.
like to really, at the end of the day, reflect on this and show up? And what does integrity look like for you in that situation? And accepting that this is okay, that it's messy right now, and just surrender to the process. And you're going to move through it so much quicker that way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about that, it reminds me of the cognitive empathy domain here. And there's two pieces there that are similar but a little bit different. And one is perspective taking. And many people can do perspective taking. They can understand it from the other person's perspective, from their perspective. The harder part is when I put myself in your shoes, right? A lot of times my clients will say, well, I wouldn't react like that if I was going through this. Like, yeah, but it's not you going through this. Like, imagine being, right, a 55-year-old woman with 3 kids who hasn't worked in 10 years, right? And she's now in this spot where her husband is not unfaithful and, is continuing to act out. Let's try that on and now tell me how you might respond in this situation. That's very different, right? And I think that's one of the important things here is that you don't have to understand from your perspective, but you need to understand this person is going through something. And if you can't do the putting yourself in their shoes, can you at least try to attach to what it feels like to be afraid, what it feels like for things to be uncertain or out of control, or to be overwhelming, and try to understand those emotions. You don't have to have this lived experience to be able to practice empathy.
Right. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife at all.
No, no.
She's learned a lot from also Terry Real, from Pia
Hmm.
Melody, Schnarch. Anyway, she talks a lot about how intimacy is like, it's knowing and being known.
Hmm.
So it's being able to allow your partner, like allow yourself to get to know them and understand them, like this kind of empathy. It's also being able to have the courage to share what's going on with you as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think also what she says too is that like your goal, if you have damaged the trust in your relationship, is not to get the trust of your partner back. It's to be trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so in how you're showing up, the choices that you're making. But if you can understand, like, okay, in these really difficult conversations, even if it's not easy, even if my partner's really upset at me, if they're sharing the truth with you, like, and you're really allowing yourself to know and feel and understand what it is that they're experiencing, effectively putting yourself in their shoes, like, that's intimacy. As weird as that sounds for people, because that's, you don't really associate intimacy with like really
Yeah,
heated conversations like this, but it's being known
absolutely.
and wanting to know more about what they're feeling. So it's like, if you can, in those difficult heated moments and your partner's really upset, if you can lean in and say, tell me more, I want to know you, I want to understand, and maybe not those exact words obviously, but if that's what you're able to effectively do, that's a way that you can actually restore intimacy
Mm-hmm.
um, with your partner. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but that's kind of where this empathy piece is, to me, in my mind, is like really going. It's like you're really revealing yourself and allowing your partner to reveal their truth as
Mm-hmm.
well, which can actually do a lot in restoring that trust over time.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And I think being okay with your partner's experience, we don't have to have the same experiences or the same perspectives about how something should be handled or how we should react or respond or feel about something. I think when we give people the space to have their experience and we hold that space and we validate it, that's also a type of empathy too, right? It's not just about having skills and saying the right thing in the moment. Sometimes it's just about being there in that deep, dark hole, and going, yeah, it's really dark down here. Uh, I don't even know how to get out of this either, but we're in it together.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's like letting your partner know, like, I see you, I hear you, I'm with you.
Mm.
And that can be really hard to do when it feels like my partner wants nothing to do with me. They're maybe attacking me, throwing daggers at me, and everything in me wants to run.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can keep calm and essentially do the opposite, I see you, I hear you, I'm with you, and don't try to fix it, but just hold space for your partner. I mean, wow, it's huge and not easy to do. Like,
Yes, yeah. It's not easy to do. All of this takes practice, right? It really does. Even as therapists, one of the things we learn in school is empathy, right? It's not like we're just born with like a ton of empathy and we had this path towards therapy. We learn empathy, we learn responses, we learn how to hold space. All of its skills that can be learned.
yeah, is there a way, like, even outside of those conversations, that can help someone more effectively show up in a place to better receive their partner? I mean, we kind of already hit it, like, you know, regulating your emotions, but there's any other thoughts that you have there that somebody can kind
Hmm.
of proactively do before going and having those hard conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this one's helpful too, for someone who's not in a relationship but maybe wants to improve for their next relationship, or maybe they're in a separation. And one of my favorite activities is using like fictional reading or movies or TV shows that you're watching and trying to understand that person's perspective and why they might choose the choices that they're making. What it would be like for you to be in those shoes, um, the different choices and feelings and experiences that might be had. And that one's not even a made up one. I got that one from a research paper, that said that using reading fiction actually improves your empathy because you're exposed to people's stories that are different than yours in these unique situations. And, most of these stories have the hero's journey where the character is faced with this challenge. They have to overcome something and they've got to go through all these different trials. And so just by reading fiction, it can help. I like to take it a step further and kind of turn it into an exercise of, well, let's put yourself in this person's shoes and what would it be like? And, if you were them, not yourself, and really walking through some of that can be helpful. You can do the same with them. If you're watching a TV show, thinking about how you would respond to the person that's on screen, that one can be really helpful too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought of doing that before. Like, here, let's watch this clip, right? And like, let's experience, like, put yourself in this person's shoes. Why are they feeling? What are they feeling? And why are they feeling that way? What do you think?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Like, I've had guys, like, maybe picture maybe yesterday they had a very difficult conversation with their partner, and have them kind of go through and, retrace their steps and kind of map out what happened and all of that, and what was their emotional response and things like that. But that's a pretty cool thought, to use fiction to, because it's like a safer place for you to feel those emotions and understand those things, right?
Yeah, it's less vulnerable and can be really fun to just challenge the thought too, and it doesn't feel personal, right? It's a fictionalized character, so you can use it like in your therapy sessions or in your coaching sessions. You can just do it even on your own as practice, right? All of this is practice and habit building. Another thing I think you can do is reflective listening, kind of. So
Yeah.
let's say you're at the grocery store. This is, interacting with someone you don't really have a relationship with. Hey, how was your day? The cashier says, oh, it's been a really long day. And for you to go, yeah, it must be really hard, right? Or gosh, you must be so tired. When do you get off? That's empathy, right? Like you are saying that because you might know what it's like to have a long day. So you're assuming they might be tired and you're kind of throwing that out there. You can do the same with your partner, right? They come home, they're running all over the place. Like, man, you must be so overwhelmed today, or it must have been a busy day. You know, it's not always, what do you need? Let me hold this space. Sometimes it's just kind of being a friend.
Yeah, what a novel idea, right? Like, just being a friend. Yeah, that's huge, because a lot of times the way we show up for a friend, like we'll give the shirt off our back to somebody, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Or if one of my friends calls me and is in a state of emergency, be like, yeah, I'm there. Like, I'm coming. I'll be there. Right. But then if our partner is kind of, their siren is going off, maybe it looks like it's in the form of an attack. So that's why those defenses go up. But really what they're saying is, I'm in desperate need of help here, and being heard, feeling seen,
Yes.
having my emotions honored here, because I've just had the rug pulled out from underneath me. If you can see it that way, it can help you to show up, like, yeah. Again, it's tough because we're just not taught these skills,
No.
like, especially the reflective communication. It comes natural in some settings, but in these difficult conversations with our partner, it's like a very unnatural way to communicate. So like, this person's saying, I want an answer. You did this, and why did you do it? It's hard to go in and say, I can see how my choices have really hurt you.
Yeah.
And you're wondering how it could be possible that I would do such a thing and damage our relationship this way. And that sounds insanely hard. Like, that's really hard to do when they're wanting, it seems like, and they're saying that they want a direct answer for the injustice or whatever it could be, right? I mean, this can look so many different ways.
So many different ways. Yeah, absolutely. But I think just acknowledging it is huge, right? That's much more helpful than if you start to be defensive and push back.
Yeah.
Right?
Man. Well, this is, already so far, I think there's so much gold in this conversation here. And I hope that people are really taking a lot away from this. I guess I noticed on your website that you have assessments and things too, to kind of help people understand. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and how those assessments help them understand where they're at as far as empathy goes?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, just to give a little bit of backstory here, so it makes sense. My dissertation was on comparing the cognitive and affective empathy of men who pay for sex compared to men who don't pay for sex, to see if there was an empathy difference. Just to save you from reading the whole thing, there was no difference in empathy in my research between men who pay for sex and don't, which tells us that men who are paying for sex don't necessarily have an empathy deficiency. However, it's not uncommon in the research and in what we kind of learn to think that men who pay for sex don't have empathy. So then I started wondering, well, where are these assumptions coming from? Because I just did this study. It's saying they're not differing in empathy from the normal group. Normal meaning they didn't say they pay for sex. It doesn't mean that they're normal in any other way. It's a research term. But so then I started noticing that I would have clients come in my office that are like, yeah, I need to fix my empathy. I'm being told I have no empathy. I'm going, that's not right. Even narcissists have empathy, right? If you look at the research, that's part of the reason why they're great at manipulating, because they are higher in cognitive empathy. like,
Mm.
who's saying this and what's going on? So I started using the assessment from some of my research that I did with my dissertation. And then I started to realize there's gaps in that too. So I actually have an open research study now where I'm trying to validate an instrument to measure empathy for those in addiction recovery. That essentially, when you take the assessment, it will say, this is where you're struggling with cognitive empathy, affective, and empathic action, which then for a trained person or for me would tell me exactly what needs to be worked on, what your barriers probably are, all those sorts of things. So I'm doing that right now with clients. And what I typically pair that with is a personality assessment because it gives me a little more information. Like if there's defensive anger, if there are certain personality features like compulsive, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, if there is narcissism, if there isn't. Actually, and I'll tell you, a lot of my guys aren't scoring high on narcissism,
Mm.
right? And so it helps me go, oh, okay, well, if we don't have a personality disorder, we can work with this a different way, right? And if we do, then, okay, this tells me this is how I need to manage it. So I have found it really helpful to do that. And typically I go through an assessment with a client. I do a whole report for them. It's about 30 pages or so, and really break down this is what came up. This is kind of what it means. This is probably how it's interacting. And, these are some of the personality features that are intertwining with what we're seeing in empathy, and then all of the therapeutic recommendations that they can do. And I'm really passionate about doing it. That's why I'm going on and on. But I have found that it's helpful too, because it's not this idea that, oh, I don't have any empathy. I need to care more. It's like, oh, actually, I have some cognitive empathy. I even have some emotional empathy. The issue is I'm getting caught in this barrier. The
Yeah.
reason I can't do the skill in a high conflict moment is because these are my barriers.
Yeah. And this is so important, especially guys that are listening here. Don't fall into the trap. Basically, what I'm hearing from you today, Stevie, don't fall into the trap of believing I don't have empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Do not fall into that trap because it sounds like, as far as what the data shows, right? It's just patently false. It's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
There are
Mm-hmm.
just barriers in the way um, of that empathy being received, felt, expressed,
Mm-hmm.
and we just got to figure out what those are. So through assessments, you can shine the light of awareness on what that is specifically for you, so you can actually do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then remove
Absolutely.
the powerlessness and maybe the poor responses and handling those hard conversations, etc.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Then we would hope to see some outcomes like compassion and holding space and all that empathic action stuff. But we've got to look at some of the other pieces that are keeping it from happening.
right, absolutely. Yeah, so hold the hope, right? Hold the hope.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Empathy, I mean, this is awesome. Like, empathy is a skill that can be learned.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably something you already have, just maybe we got to figure a few things out,
Mm-hmm.
and those things are all figure outable.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. It takes effort though, right? So maybe what would you say to someone who's maybe trying but seems like they're coming up short, or it's just not working, or it's they're really trying to show up and maybe their partner's not responding
Mm-hmm.
very well in their eyes? What would you say there?
I, one of the things I like to do is look at the strengths. So what is working? How do I build a bridge from that to get me to where I need to go? So if you know things that are working, I would definitely put more investment there. The things that you feel like aren't working, I tweak it a little bit. If you don't know if anything's working, it can always help to ask a partner. Some of my clients will say like, hey, what I just said to you, is that right? Is that how you're feeling? Is that, does that fit? Sometimes they'll say, what percentage of that did I get right? Just so it doesn't feel like all or nothing.
Yeah.
And they have more of an idea that can help. But I think trying different things and really understanding what your barriers are is huge, right? I don't think you have to go through an assessment to figure out barriers. I think there's probably some things you can take from this conversation or just learning more about yourself to begin to see what keeps me from being able to share this moment with another person or give compassion when I'm in conflict or when something is stressful.
Yeah.
But definitely don't just throw your hands up and back out. Try to stick to what's working, rework the things that aren't. It really is practice. It's trial and error. I think the other thing is, I said this earlier, but practicing empathy is not to make the other person feel different.
Hmm.
So if you're saying it and your partner doesn't feel different, it doesn't mean you're not practicing empathy, right? We cannot just heal people with our words. Sometimes words are powerful. They can hurt people. They can help people,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take away what the person's experiencing. So an example is if I have a client come in who just experienced a death of someone close to them, and I express empathy, it doesn't change their situation. It doesn't necessarily change their sadness, but what they know is they're not alone in that moment, right? They have someone that noticed them, that's sitting with them in it. And there's times I've told clients, like, I really wish I could say something to take this away, but I know that I can't. Like, this is really hard. This is overwhelming, or this was unexpected. I know. And I don't think there's anything magic in that. Actually, I'm saying I don't know what to do. I'm being honest, but I think that is sometimes what people need to hear. They just need to be recognized. So I'd encourage you not to get into that codependency dance of, I should, when I say this, you should feel better or different, because that's not necessarily what empathy is about either. A lot of times the person does feel different, but you cannot use it as a tool to try to force that outcome.
Right. And remembering that, like that codependency, that's like, I'm only okay if you're okay.
Yeah.
You're not okay right now, so then I'm not okay. So I got to do everything I can to make you okay.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's
and
the,
that's a barrier too.
yeah,
That gets frustrating
yeah,
after a while.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Hmm.
And it can really make your partner upset.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Well, because at some point you're going to, again, just want to throw your hands up, and it's hard. Your partner is healing from trauma, and it's complex trauma. They didn't fall off the bike and scratch their knee and they'll be better in 2 weeks. So if you're in that codependent dance, you will burn out very quickly.
yeah. Maybe we can finish up with kind of back where we started at the beginning. I mentioned your book about a therapeutic separation. So there are situations, and someone listening might be in a situation with their partner where it's so toxic that it's
Hmm.
not good. I mean, it could be
Hmm.
abusive, um, and they're just in this dance where nothing's working, nothing's helping. It deteriorates to maybe could even get violent, maybe not just physically, but verbally or what have you. What is, just in a nutshell, I think, just everybody listening, I think we're going to get back together and do a full episode on
Hmm.
therapeutic separation and talk about the book, the workbook, and things. But can you just quick nutshell what a therapeutic separation is, why it might be helpful if they're caught in this dance?
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. So a therapeutic separation is an intentional separation that is very structured, right? What we know about separation research is that when you do an ambiguous separation, so there's no structure, there's no timeline, there's no kind of rules or guidelines to follow, it's really hard on the relationship and the partners involved. And when you have a structured separation, that's very different. Everyone knows what's happening and everyone knows there's a goal. For some couples, the goal is to, help themselves to regulate, to get to a more stable place. Sometimes it's just to take a step back to get out of these negative cycles. A lot of the times, my clients come back together after a separation. Sometimes it doesn't. But the point is that we don't just keep forcing the relationship through this negative cycle. We're kind of trying to put it on pause while holding it together, if that makes sense. And so there are different levels of separation. And sometimes it's in home because sometimes you just can't physically separate. You've got kids or finances don't make it happen. So there are controlled separations, there are full separations where you're out. The idea is for at least 90 days, we are, shifting the roles a little bit, creating some level of separation and really focusing in on ourselves. And there should be a lot of individual work that's done during that time that would hopefully help shift that negative cycle to a more productive relationship cycle. And now we're going to be talking through things differently, solving things differently. And hopefully there's trust built during that time. It depends on the couple. We talk about it in the book that, if the couple's in a good place, you can do, I can't remember if it's weekly or monthly dates. It kind of depends on where you're at in the relationship. That you're still doing check-ins, you're still collaborating on things. So it's not 90 days complete, no contact. Right. It's like we have just taken a little bit of a step back so things aren't so intense.
Right. Just
And
very planned. Like what you're doing is
yes,
just very
very
planned and
planned.
intentional. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just if you're in that situation where it's just super toxic, I know a lot of people have a fear of like a separation because there is a lot of data that says, hey, an ambiguous separation causes a lot of damage. Or you hear horror stories of, yeah, they were separated and the relationship just ended, marriage was over, right? So I understand a lot of that fear. This is something completely different. This is
Yes.
structured with guidance, with help,
Yes.
right? There's accountability, there's a plan. It's therapeutic, meaning one partner has a plan, treatment plan. They're getting in for therapy or coaching, or there's
Yeah.
accountability there, right? And so is the other partner as well. There's still communication. So just know, like, if this is like really deteriorating in the relationship, you don't feel like it's going anywhere, and maybe you're really trying. This could be something, if it's so toxic, this could be something that could be a huge help. And I've seen it. I mean, I'm sure you have as well, but I've seen it completely
Absolutely.
transform relationships. Because you
Yeah.
finally, it's like you have that space and time to really do that deep work on yourself so that you can more effectively reintegrate and come back together.
Yeah. Well, and it's, not this constant reactivity between two people where we're actually just reacting to our trauma in the moment, but we're actually able to come from that regulated, responsive place. And it just completely can transform the relationship.
Yeah. Amazing. Stevie, this has been fantastic. Like super appreciate you coming on and having this conversation. I hope that those listening have gotten a lot of, I mean, there's just a lot of little things that we shared that
Yeah, I
you
really
shared
loved
that,
this conversation.
yeah, that can be really helpful because it's like those small and simple things that make all the difference when you're having these really tough conversations. I guess maybe to wrap up, unless there's anything else that you wanted to add, but if they're curious about working with you, how might they work with you? Where do they find you? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll start with, if you want to know more about the empathy model and just some of the things we talked about here, I have it all outlined on my empathy website. It's called relationalempathy.com. It goes over the model, assessing intensives, work, all that type of stuff. If you want to see a little bit more of that work in conjunction with like my couples work and sex addiction work, my kind of therapy website is arisedallas.com, ARISE Dallas.
Okay. Awesome. Also, yeah, that book's coming out on April 1st.
April 1st, yeah.
Is there a specific website for that, or can they find that on your website when that time comes?
You can find it on my website, but actually it's already on Amazon. I did not
Oh, no
even
way.
expect that. Yeah, now I'm on Amazon, which is like a really weird thing.
That's pretty
Just for
cool.
those listening, it's my first book, so it feels a
First
little
book, no big
different.
deal. No big deal.
Yeah,
It's on Amazon, no big deal.
it feels a little weird, but it is on Amazon. You can
Very
find it
cool.
there.
Yeah, I'll put a link below for those listening. I'll put a link below so you can find that. Because it sounds like she was telling me earlier, it's like a 200-page workbook, like literally no stone left unturned, so you can successfully navigate therapeutic separation, which is a big deal if you're in a tough spot.
That's my hope, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And if you're struggling with pornography and you're looking to make a change finally in your life, it's your time. We have the Porn Free Brotherhood, which is completely free, it costs you nothing. At the time of this recording, it's about 550-ish men, right around there. And it's a great environment, like being around those that are also kind of coming out of the shadows and saying, hey, I'm ready for a change and I'm ready to commit and learn the skills is super empowering. It's a great environment to be in. We have other things, other options for you as well. But again, that's free. There's a link below. It's school.com/porn free. And that's PXRN free.com. Cool. Stevie, thanks so much again. This has been really fun.
Thank you. Yeah,
We'll
I
talk to you later.
appreciate it.